Dun 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 dun. Gonna get copyrighted. Welcome back, S'mores, to Beyond the Campfire. We got another great episode for you today. Steven here is going to be talking about a really great artifact, interesting artifact. I think this is our first artifact mystery. We've talked about people disappearing. We've talked about objects disappearing that contain people. This is the first just object that just disappeared. No people with it.
Yeah, Will is exactly right. Yeah, so we've talked a lot about places, we've talked a lot about people, we've talked a lot about creatures and movements. This is our first mystery item, and yeah, obviously, me and Will are both Christians, so obviously there's a religious component to it, um, but yeah, there is the historical part of it. There's the pop culture side of it. You have the Indiana Jones movies, where Indiana Jones goes and looks for this thing. But yeah, today we will be breaking down the Ark of the Covenant, what it is, what the history of it is, and where it could possibly be today, if it still exists or not.
Mm-hmm.
So we will get into all of that. But yeah, before we get started, again, we are Beyond the Campfire. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. At our ad is at Beyond Campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, go look us up, watch the reels, give us a follow, listen to our podcast, and we'll have some more announcements for us, I'm sure, at the end. But yeah, without further ado, let us get into it. So, the Ark of the Covenant. What is it? It is a gold plated wooden chest with two cherubim on top of it, which are also gold plated. And it was in the Old Testament an item that supposedly contained the Ten Commandments that were given to Moses by God at the top of the mountain. And yeah, that is where it's first mentioned in the Bible. So when you read the Bible, it is built and designed in Exodus chapter 25. So Moses receives the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are written by God's finger. So God had written out the Ten Commandments in his own hand. And they said, hey, if we're going to carry these commandments, we need a safekeeping. And so God orders the Israelites, the ancient Israelites. This is about 3000 BC or so, or really, no. 1445 BC. I'm going way back. Yeah, so around 1445 BC, the Ark of God is constructed, is made primarily out of wood. You have two cherubim facing each other, with their wings coming out and also pointing towards each other. And the whole thing is plated in gold. And once it is consecrated by the priests, no one, no one, including the priests of God, are allowed to touch it. And we'll get into a little bit about why that is. But from its beginning, it was meant to be a holy artifact that held another holy artifact, the Ten Commandments of Moses, that were given to him by God. So, Will, any thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns so far?
Have you ever seen that joke? I think it was Family Guy that might have made it. There was actually 15 commandments.
No, I haven't heard a joke. What?
Moses came down with the 15 commandments and he goes, I bring you the 15 commandments. And he dropped one of the tablets and goes, I bring you the 10 commandments.
Oh, okay. That would be a Family Guy joke, wouldn't it? So,
I think it was Family Guy. It was one of those shows where they made like a joke about that. It might have been even Robot Chicken, maybe.
hmm. Well, Moses originally destroyed the first 10 commandments. So,
Yep.
in theory, you could say there's actually 20 commandments, but
Could you imagine, like, I mean, God knows everything that happens. But just imagine, you're like, all right, Moses, here you go. Let me write this down for you. All right, there you go. All right, take good care of that. All right, that's my word. Take care of it. And then you see him come back up the mountain. You're like, what do you want? I gave you the 10 commandments. I dropped them. What do you mean you dropped them, Butterfingers? Come on.
Yeah, it's funny because that story even gets into the other story of the Israelites building a golden calf when Moses leaves for the time period that he did. But yeah, he comes and he's so mad he breaks the Ten Commandments, and then he looks at Aaron, and Aaron had clearly built the golden calf, but Aaron was just like, "Oh, I just threw this golden jewelry, and this golden calf somehow came out." And it's like, "What do you mean it just came out, Aaron?" It's like,
How
"You built."
how long
Uh,
how long was Moses on the mountain for them to take that amount of time to get gold to build a golden calf?
hey, when you want to sin, you want to sin. So
Talk about it's talk about being impatient, you know?
right.
Like, all right, Moses is gonna go up there. God's gonna write some stuff for him. Gonna come down. We're gonna follow those laws. You're sitting there, you waiting. Dang man, he's taking an awful long time. Hey, why don't we worship a golden calf while we wait?
Hey, man, people do weird things. So
Man, Moses came down the mountain with those 10 commandments, and he was like, he sees the golden calf, and he throws them down, and he's sitting there like, you guys couldn't wait 5 minutes for me to go up the mountain to come down with the 10 commandments.
well, and it's really sad because these are the same Israelites that had seen him part the Red Sea, that had seen him move a
Exactly.
pillar of fire, and they just forgot all of that for Lord knows who, what cows. Apparently they really liked cows. So I don't know.
5 minutes. You just had to wait an extra 5 minutes.
I don't know if you've ever heard this, Will, but some people think that modern day Hinduism actually descended from some of the pagan religions we see in the Old Testament. Uh, there's a couple of reasons why. So, one, if you look at the pagan religions that a lot of the Israelites would fall into a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
they would revere the cow. What does Hinduism revere as, semi divine?
Yeah.
Cows. Um, two of like the big bad gods in the Old Testament are the god Baal and the goddess Asherah. So you'd have monuments to Baal, and then you'd have the Asherah poles. And Hinduism has a couple of gods that are very similar to how Baal is described and to how Asherah is described. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
that could be its own thing.
Is
Um,
Baal and Baal two different people?
No, they're the same thing. I've heard people
Oh,
pronounce it differently. So,
okay. Because when you're like Baal, I was like, I thought it was Ball. And then you said Ball, and I was like, wait, are Baal and Ball? Like, could you imagine naming your kids Baal and Ball? Twins.
hey,
Twins.
Bale is not quite as bad as Ball. If you name your kid Ball, he's definitely
Could
getting.
you imagine? Because the wife and I talked about this because, we're having our baby in January.
Yeah.
And he's named after me. And so we're like, well, we can't call him Will. My wife's like, I don't want to call him Willie because he's going to get made fun of. Could you imagine naming your son Willie Ball?
Like, golly,
That would be like the worst. Like, forget boy named Sue.
that kid is getting punched in the face at the cafeteria. So,
Hey,
for
Willie Ball, give me your lunch money.
man.
Anyways,
But yeah. All right, we still got some history to cover. I'll try to speed through the history because I want to definitely want to get into the theories. But so yeah, you have the Ark of the Covenant.
mhm,
It contains the Ten Commandments, and the Ten Commandments presumably just kind of stay there uh, forever. If the Ark of the Covenant still exists today, presumably the Ten Commandments would be in there as well. But yeah, we don't hear about it for a while. Oh, by the way, quick interjection. So nobody was allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant. God made it pretty clear that whoever touched the Ark of the Covenant would die because it was so holy. So
mhm,
what they did is the Ark of the Covenant, in each of its corners, it had these rings. And what you would do is the priest would get these poles, and they would insert the poles into the rings, and then you would have priest on the front end and then priest on the back end, and the priest would pick up the poles, and that's how they were able to move the Ark of the Covenant from place to place.
Mm.
They would place the poles in there and then carry it by the poles, because if they actually touched it, then they die. So
Yeah. So, because that was the thing, like at the beginning, when you're like, "Yeah, we're going to go into history and we're going to go into this," I was like, "Yeah," and then we're going to get into face melting. Because you remember in Indiana Jones, the face is melted off. So
yep.
I was thinking, I was like, "Is this just some crazy thing like Hollywood decided to do?" But no, you're over here saying, "You touch it, you die." You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. So there's actually a couple of Bible stories where people actually do die because they touch the Ark of the Covenant. So I'm gonna get into it because actually there's actually a ton of stories on the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible. I don't think I'm actually going to be able to cover all of them.
Hmm.
Um,
I didn't
but
realize there were so many.
yeah, but I'm actually yeah, but I'll talk about the most notable ones. So okay, so Moses dies, and the priests are passed on through Aaron's lines, and so the priests are the ones taking care of the ark for a while. The ark is not really mentioned again until we get to First Samuel. So Moses dies. Moses passes on leadership to Joshua. Joshua dies, and then you have the judges ruling Israel for a long time, and then you come to the last judge, Samuel. Samuel actually we might have to do a podcast on him because have you heard of Solomon the witch at Endor?
Yes, yes, because there was
That's a
the reason why I was yeah,
go
the reason why I was thinking about that was because I saw TikTok where, and I won't go too much into it because, we have our views on how we view ghosts and everything, but it was talking about could ghosts actually be biblical? And I think I sent you that video
ahead. Yeah,
because they were talking about the witch of Endor and how she brought forth the ghost of
Samuel.
Samuel. Oh, it was Samuel. Okay. Yeah. So she brought forth the ghost of Samuel, and a lot of people were like, biblically we debate about it because, you go to heaven, you go to hell, there's no in between. Was this actually the ghost of Samuel?
We'll
And
have to. You know what? That might be a future episode we do because I think that would be a fun topic to cover because
oh yeah.
there actually is a lot more to that story than I realized, and there's a lot of theories. But that'll be a future
Yeah.
episode.
Because
But
because it kind of went into that a little bit because what they were also trying to, and I'm not to get off topic because we'll talk about stuff like this later, but they were trying to say like demons, like the demons that we see are not actually fallen angels, but are actually most of the demons that we like people encounter today are actually the ghost of the Nephilim from old times.
oh, interesting.
Because the reason why they say about that is because, the fallen angels reside in hell, right?
Hmm.
Well, then how come when Jesus cast the demons into the pigs, they said, do not send us back to the abyss?
Mm. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll, we'll stay on topic, but yeah, that is something we'll have to look
Yeah.
into.
Kind of cool, kind of some interesting stuff there. But yeah. Continue about Samuel.
Okay, so Samuel, yeah, the next time we really hear about is when Samuel is a boy, so he hasn't grown up to become the prophet he is quite yet. But yeah, Samuel starts to work at the tent of meeting, working with the priests, and it's mentioned that the ark of God is there. Now, while Samuel is a boy, the Philistines attack, and they're winning the battle, and the Israelites are like, you know what's a good idea? Let's bring out the ark of God. Maybe this will help us win the battle. Well, they bring out the ark of God, and the Philistines actually still defeat Israel, and they actually capture the ark of the covenant, and they bring it to their Philistine cities. Um, and for a while, this is a big disaster. Israel has just lost its holiest item, and they're just they're just really sad about it. Actually, it's so sad that Eli, Samuel's mentor, when he hears that the Ark of God had been captured, he fell over backwards and he broke his neck and died because he was so shocked that the Ark of God had been captured. Like for the Israelites, the Ark of the Covenant being taken away from them kind of was like a sign that God had like left them, that God wasn't for them anymore. So it was a pretty big deal when this happened.
Mm.
Now, this is where the story gets interesting because that's not actually the interesting part of the story. So the Philistines, they obviously don't know the rules of the Ark or what it stands for or anything. They're just like, oh, there's this cool golden box with angels on it. Cool. We took it from them.
Yeah.
They take it to their temple and they place it beside their idol, Dagon. So Dagon is one of the chief gods in the Philistine religion. The Philistines come into their temple the next day, and their idol Dagon has fallen on his face, and they're just like, "What the heck?" Because for them, that's really disrespectful. When your god has been like pushed down on his face, that's a sign of massive disrespect to their god. So they're like, "Okay, this is weird. We don't think any of us did that, but like let's just
Yeah.
pick up Dagon back." So, by the way, if you guys are curious where the story is found, you can read First Samuel chapter 5, and Samuel chapter 5 really covers the story of the Ark of the Covenant in Philistine. They come back the next day. Dagon has not only fallen over a second time, but he's actually broken into pieces. So like that's about as massively disrespectful to a false god
Yeah.
as you get. So they're just like, okay, we don't know what this Ark of the Covenant deal is, but let's maybe move it to another city. So they move it to another one of their cities. Plagues start to hit that city. There's plagues of sores. So a lot of the people in that city start to get like sores all over their face and their
Hmm.
back, and their neck. And so they freak out. They move it to another city, and then at that city, there's a plague of rats. So rats start to infest everywhere. There's rats in people's homes. There's rats in businesses, and so eventually the Philistines start to be like, "We don't know what this is." They said that the God of Israel, his hand is heavy upon us. So they said, let's just give this thing back to the Israelites because as long as it stays with us, bad stuff's going to happen to us.
Hmm.
So they arrange a deal with Israel, and they make a deal to return the Ark of the Covenant to Israel. And so eventually they do. So they give it back to Israel. Israel's happy again. They have the Ark of the Covenant. But for those brief few months while the Ark of the Covenant is in Philistine, it was just doing all this weird stuff to the Philistines. So, any thoughts or comments on that before I get to the final biblical story?
Well, you F around to find out. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like imagine being this kind of like this massive army. And you just conquer these people. Like, yeah, we're real cool. We even took their fancy box, and then you stick it next to your idol, and then you come in there and you're like this big old stone statue falls over, and you're like, well, I didn't do that. You didn't do that. Who did that? And then you're like, let's just put it back up. Maybe it was something else. And then like next day it's knocked over again and it's shattered. Like that would terrify me. Or like, imagine being in the city and you're like, oh yeah, well, they're bringing that really cool gold box we stole. And then you got these little rats running around. You're like, what was that on my foot? You know?
Alrighty. I'm just gonna fly through these last stories, and then we'll get into some of the theories. In First Samuel chapter 6, so actually these are the Israelites that received the ark. So the Israelites get the ark back, and
Mhm.
it takes about 70 men to go retrieve it from the Philistines. The 70 men decide, hey, you know what's a good idea? Let's just look inside the Ark of the Covenant. Uh, guess what happens to them?
Idiots.
Dead. Yeah, First Samuel chapter 6 says the Lord strikes down the 70 men for looking into looking into the ark. The ark's not all bad. So the ark, you know, gets a lot of people killed, but actually after that, it's taken to the house of this guy named Abinadab, and it stays there for about 20 years. First Samuel chapter 7 says that while the Ark of the Covenant was in Abinadab's house, he was blessed in all he did. Now, we don't know the specifics of that, but when it says blessed in all he did, the kind of work he did, the way he ran his household, his health. Uh, I don't know if he was married or not, but maybe finding a wife. Maybe I need to find this Ark of the Covenant. Maybe it can be
Oh man.
maybe it can be a wingman for me. But anyway, the Ark of the Covenant, as long as it was in Abinadab's house, it was blessing him and his household. So now eventually it ends up being taken away. Um, but this is the last story I'll share of on the again. There's a bunch of stories of the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible. The last one I'll share is the one of Uzzah. So Uzzah is one of David's servants, and King David wins a big battle. He decides to bring out the Ark of the Covenant, which is actually a sin because the priests are supposed to handle the Ark of the Covenant, not the king. But King David, he's happy, he's rejoicing, and he's just like,
Yeah.
hey, let's bring out the Ark of the Covenant. Well, since he's not a priest, he doesn't actually know the proper way to carry the Ark of the Covenant. He kind of knows that, like, you shouldn't touch it. But instead of carrying it with the poles, he puts it on like an ox cart, and they wheel the ox cart like through the city in celebration. Well, there's a reason God had commanded them to carry it with poles instead of putting it on an ox cart. Because what happens is while they're moving the ox cart hits a bump. The Ark of the Covenant actually starts to fall off of the ox cart. And Uzzah, one of the servants, he's being well meaning, but what he does is he sticks out his hands, he puts his hand on the Ark of the Covenant, adjusts it back on the ox cart, and he actually prevents the Ark of the Covenant from falling over and breaking. Now, you would think that this is a good thing, right?
He dies.
Uzzah dies. And David David is it says David greatly feared God that day, and it said David was also angry that day. Now we don't know whether he was angry at God. We don't know if he was angry at himself for not, handling the Ark of the Covenant properly. We don't know if he was mad at Uzzah. But David was just like, man, Uzzah was trying to do something good. And so, he touches the Ark of the Covenant, not to like not in a
Hmm.
bad way. He's trying to save it. But they said, wow, even him just touching it like that to adjust it so that it doesn't fall, he dies for
Hmm.
that.
Yeah. I think it makes
Um,
me. I feel like the reason why probably people die is because we talk about how as Christians we say that to look upon the face of God is death because it's just so mighty and so beautiful and so powerful. It just kills you. You can't comprehend it. I wonder if that's kind of the same way with the ark. That like just to touch God's presence, it's just so powerful, so beautiful that it's not like he intends to do it, but it's just so much of a powerful object that just to touch it, we cannot comprehend it enough that it just kills us.
yeah, and when you watch the Indiana Jones movies, like obviously it's a bit dramatized, but I mean, yeah, the guy's like getting melted for interacting with the Ark of the Covenant. I mean that's not too far off from the stuff you see happen in the Bible. So,
No.
yeah, I mean the writers of Indiana Jones um, we're not being too crazy when they did some of those scenes. So, any thoughts or comments before I get into the how the Ark of the Covenant was lost and the theories of where it is now?
Yeah, I mean that's the question I was fixing to ask was because you're like this is the last story you're covering. I didn't know if you were going to go into how it got lost or
Yeah, it's
the
not
last
really
time I was on.
got lost like other than like. Well, okay, I'll just go ahead and say how it got lost. So Israel sins, and the nation of Babylon comes, and they deport all the Israelites to Babylon, or well, they don't deport them, but rather, I guess, import them into Babylon. Anyway, the Israelites are not in their homeland anymore, and they won't be there again until like for another several thousand years. But Babylonians come, they take the Israelites away, they destroy the temple of God, the one that is built by King Solomon, where the Ark of the Covenant is, and that is the last we hear of the Ark of the Covenant, at least in the Old Testament. There's a New Testament reference to it, which I will get to because that's actually one of the theories of where it is now. But yeah, we don't hear about it again until the Book of Revelation, and um, we don't know if the Babylonians destroyed it. We don't know if they took it with them. If they did take it with them, well, why didn't they experience some of the curses that the Philistines
Mm-hmm.
encounter? But all we know is the last we hear of it officially, it was in the temple. The temple is destroyed by the Babylonians. So, what does that mean for the Ark of the Covenant? Any questions, thoughts, or comments before we get into the theories? That's the last time it is seen.
I mean, it probably still out there. Like, I'm not going to say it got destroyed. I don't think it got destroyed. Because if it was this powerful object of God, I don't think it'd be destroyed. I
Yeah,
think it's out there.
yeah. I think if the Babylonians didn't capture it themselves, I think then it's possibly buried somewhere in the rubble. But it's not. Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think anything like that is
Mm-mm.
getting destroyed. Um, so okay, let's get into the theories. Uh, so some believe that it was captured by the Babylonians, so the Babylonians didn't just destroy it. They believe the Babylonians actually took it with them to back to Babylon, and it's somewhere amongst the relics of the Babylonians. The Babylonians were eventually taken over by the Persians, uh, and so they believe that the Babylonians had it, but then it got lost when the Persians took over the Babylonians. Um, so that's one theory. Again, my question would be, it's about 70 years between the Babylonians taking over Israel and then the Babylonians being taken over by Persia. So if the Babylonians did have it, how come we don't hear about the Ark of the Covenant for those 70 years? Um, you know, that's when the story of Daniel and the lions den happened. That's when you have the prophet Ezekiel, and none of those guys, even though they're in a Babylonian captivity, none of those guys mentioned the Ark of the Covenant. So for me, I highly doubt that one is true. I highly doubt the Babylonians have it, because I feel like if they did, people would have known about it. So that's
Yeah.
kind of number one. The Babylonians have it, and then it got lost to time when the Persians took over Babylon. The second theory comes from one of the books that Roman Catholics actually consider to be scripture. So the second theory is from the second book of Maccabees. So the second book of Maccabees, God warns the prophet Jeremiah that the Babylonian invasion is about to happen, and that it needs to be hidden. The ark is going to be hidden in a cave. That God, is going to hide the Ark of the Covenant in a cave, and he says that he will not reveal the cave's location until the time that God should gather his people again together and receive them unto mercy. So a lot of Catholics believe that that's where the Ark of the Covenant is. It's been hidden in the cave somewhere near Jerusalem or some other cave,
Mm-hmm.
waiting until the Jewish people are collected together again. Now, the modern state of Israel exists. Presumably, the Jewish people have been gathered again.
Mm-hmm.
The cave hasn't.
But
I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
well, I kind of wonder. I know they say when the Jewish people are regathered, could it be that it's not obviously not when the state of Israel is reestablished, but could it be that once Christ comes back and he rules over Earth for those 1,000 years? Could that be what they're meaning? You know, his people are gathered together again. Maybe that's why we haven't found it, is because we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, if the second theory is true, then perhaps there's still going to be a future retrieval of it. Um, but yeah, okay. Here is theory number 3. So the Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims that they have it. So the Ethiopian Orthodox Church according to tradition, states that King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba had a son together. Now, that's not recorded in the Bible. Is it possible? Maybe. I mean, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, so it's not crazy to think that maybe he and the Queen of Sheba hooked up at some point. Um, I'm
Ooh.
agnostic on that because again, the Bible doesn't mention it, but according to them, according to tradition, King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba hooked up. Queen of Sheba had a son named Menelik, and they said that Menelik at some point came into possession of the Ark of the Covenant, and he has it. He had it kept until the gospel got spread to the Ethiopians, and then the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, when they realized the significance of the Ark of the Covenant and what they had, they've kept it under key. And so now, can you go see it? The Ethiopian Orthodox Church does not let the public see it.
Mm.
So they have it in a church in the city of Axum, which is in Ethiopia, and you can go visit the church, but the priests of that church do not let the public see it. So
Mm.
with one exception, now there is one time that they did let somebody in to come and examine it, so let's see let's see when exactly was the timeline. I think it was in 2013. I could be off on that,
Oh.
the Ethiopian Orthodox Church let a professor of Ethiopian studies, a guy named Edward Uhlendorf, they let Edward Uhlendorf into the church, and they let him examine it to kind of like verify it or
Yeah.
not. And this is what Edward Uhlendorf said. He says they have a wooden box, but it's empty. It He said it looks to be of middle to late medieval construction when a lot of relics were fabricated.
Mm.
So now the Ethiopian Orthodox Church just says he's wrong and that his methods are not the best. Uh, but according to his analysis, he's just like, yeah, this. He's like, it looks like the Ark of the Covenant, minus,
Yeah.
but he says, um, yeah, he's like, this looks to be something built a few hundred years ago, not a few thousand years ago. So,
Yeah.
you know, take with that what you will.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of artifacts. Like I know there's one artifact we're planning to cover eventually. That'd probably be like the end of the year. But I feel like we're probably gonna have the same kind of thing there, where it's like we got it, and then you find out that it was actually made back in medieval times.
Yeah. Um. Okay, I have one more big theory, and then I'll rattle off the the smaller ones,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll get into the biblical one because that's the one I tend to believe. So okay, the last big one is that this is the Knights Templar theory. So
Mm.
so you had so this theory is not exactly clear about how the Ark of the Covenant got to Europe, but the theory goes that somehow the Ark of the Covenant was kind of passed around, depending on who you ask. It went from the Babylonians to the Persians to the Greeks to the Romans, but however chain you want to go through, the chain is eventually it ends up in Rome. And again, a lot of Catholics also like this theory too because it gives them a lot of credence of being the one true church as they like
Yeah.
to. But it was in France, or it was in Rome rather, and the Knights Templar, at some point during the sacking of Rome, came in and stole the Ark of the Covenant and took it to France, um, where they said it was eventually destroyed in a fire that um, burned down the church. But for a while, the theory goes that the Knights Templar used it for a lot of their religious ceremonies before it was eventually destroyed. So I
Yeah.
don't know if you ever played the Assassin's Creed games.
Mm-mm.
Um, okay, yeah, but the thought
Well,
of
actually, I take that back. I did play. I think I played the one where you fight in the Revolutionary War. I had that one on Xbox 360 at one point.
okay,
That's how old we are.
yeah, but the idea that the Knights Templar just came in and stole the Ark of the Covenant is kind of cool. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So
I watched a show. I'd have to think about it because Mark Hamill was actually in the show, and it got canceled sadly. And it was basically talking about the fall of the Templars. Like it was like a doc
uh,
series, so it was a little dramatized, but it covered a lot of some historical aspects, and it was about like the fall of the Templars and how they kind of fell and lost their status in the public and kind of became like just the way they got kind of taken out and everything. And of course, I did watch the movie Kingdom of Heaven. I think is what it's called. I think it's got Orlando. I think it's Orlando Bloom. Is it Orlando Bloom? Might be. I think it is Orlando Bloom. But it's about part of the one of the oh crap, what's it called? The Templars went and slaughtered all the um, Islam. Well, the Crusades. That's what it was. The Crusades talked about. I think it was the Second Crusade. They talked about a little bit in that movie where you had King Baldwin the Fourth. So I think it's every guy's dream to be a Templar.
oh yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm gonna speed through these smaller theories. Some of the smaller theories is that the priest of God, before the Babylonians took over, they said that they buried it beneath the Temple Mount. And if you know anything about the Temple Mount as it exists today, um, there currently sits various Jewish and Muslim religious sites. And so, if the Ark of the Covenant is under there, um, I don't think the Jews or the Muslims are gonna allow their land to be dug up to
Yeah.
find it. Which is actually kind of sad because I feel like they would have some interest in it, but I kind of don't like this theory because I feel like probably if it was buried under the Temple Mount, I think it's probably already been looked for. It's just people haven't really found it,
Yeah.
which is whatever, I guess. Um, all right, a couple other smaller theories. Others believe that the Ark was only made of wood, and that the Old Testament account talking about it being gold was kind of just an embellishment of it. Some believe that it was captured by the Egyptian pharaoh. So one of the pharaohs, after its last mention, Babylon, stole it. This theory is the one that actually inspired the plot of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Mm-hmm.
Raiders of the Lost Ark is kind of inspired by that theory. Um, but yeah, those are some of the smaller ones. Uh, this is what I personally believe because it's mentioned in the Book of Revelation, and so my theory and the theory of a lot of Christians is that the Ark of the Covenant was taken up by God to heaven, and that's where it is right now. It's in heaven. It was
Hmm.
miraculous by God. Because Revelation 11:19 says this. Because again, Old Testament, the last you hear of it is when Babylon takes over, and you don't hear about it again until Revelation chapter 11. So like way, way far later. Revelation chapter 11, verse 19 says this. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant was seen within his temple.
Hmm.
Flashes, lightning, rumbling, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. Now, a couple of Christians, some, a couple of Christian theories will say, well, it's it's there's basically two trains of thought on this verse. The first train of thought is it's there now. So the Ark of the Covenant is taken up to heaven before Babylon takes over, and that's where it is, and that's where it continues to be. Others believe no, it's still on Earth, whether it's in a cave, whether the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has it, whether whether it's buried under the Temple Mount.
Mm.
The second Christian theory is that at some point it will be removed from its earthly place and then it will be taken to heaven.
Mm.
If Revelation 11:19 is to be believed, and because I'm a Christian, I believe it will come true.
Yeah.
At some point, at some point, the Ark of the Covenant will be in heaven. Now, whether it is there now or whether it will be there later, I don't know. But that'll do it. I don't know if you had any thoughts, questions, comments,
Mm.
or concerns on any of that, but
Yeah. Well, my question is because you said you want to go, you go with that theory that it'll be in heaven at some point. Are you one of the Christians that believe it's there now, or do you believe it's here on Earth right now?
okay. So I'll just give my opinion. I believe it's there now, and the reason is I feel like if it was still here on Earth, there's either two possibilities. One, it's buried under rubble somewhere, and I don't know. I don't see God allowing that to happen, because God didn't allow it to stay in Philistine.
Yeah.
So if he didn't allow it to stay in Philistine, I don't think he's going to allow it to be under rubble for 200 years. If it is currently in the possession of a group of people, well, then my follow up question is why aren't those people experiencing some of the curses that other people get? Now, if let's say the Ethiopian Orthodox have it, then if they have it, I personally believe Ethiopian Orthodox are true Christians. There's just like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. But like,
Yeah.
if I don't know if the Knights Templar still have it somehow, and I'm pretty dubious on whether the Knights Templar are actually truly Christians or not. I'm just like, oh yeah, why aren't they being cursed? So
Mhm.
anyway, for me,
Well.
if it's still here on Earth, I feel like it would be doing things to
Mhm.
people, and because we don't hear of it doing anything to people, or we just don't know where it is, to me I believe it's probably in heaven then. So that's my theory. What are your thoughts though?
Well, my thought, like the ark is mentioned a lot in the Bible. And I feel like something like God beaming up the Ark of the Covenant and the covenant just poof gone. Where'd it go? Before Babylon attacks. I feel like that would be written in the Bible somewhere. There would be a story about we saw the Ark of the Covenant there one moment and poof gone the next. Or if God pulls it up in a beam of light, or a fiery chariot with an angel rolls by and says, throw it in the back. Like I feel like we would know about it. So that's kind of why maybe God waited for the Israelites and everybody to kind of leave to kind of sneak in as a thief and just kind of be like, all right, Ark's coming back with me. You guys obviously can't take care of it. I'm repossessing your Ark. And that's my thought. I feel like if it is in heaven now, it was probably taken. If God did take it, he took it after everybody kind of left.
Yeah,
Because he probably didn't want to make a big scene about it and was just like, yeah, I'm gonna take my Ark. All right. Obviously, you guys don't want it anymore. You threw a temple on top of it. But my
mm,
other thought is, we talk about if it's not in heaven, where is it today? And I'm kind of torn because I can kind of see that if it is in heaven now, it was taken shortly after. But if that's not the case and it is still here on Earth, you're right. Where could it be? And you mentioned the Knights Templar. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Knights Templar, they fell pretty hard in the later centuries after the Crusades and everything because they didn't have anything else to do, and like France was getting mad at them and everything, and they fell out of power and everything. So the question could be, what if the Knights Templar did have it, and what if that's the reason why they fell out of power when they did? You know,
that's
or
fair.
what if that's fair? I mean, and then you think about maybe it is still in Israel somewhere, but because the Jews and the Muslims have it, maybe that's the reason why Israel and Palestine and Iraq and all these countries are still going to war and they hate each other. Could be the Ark powers, flooding in. But I think if anything, I think the two theories I will go with, and there might be a little third one I might agree with. I agree that it is definitely not. It is either here on Earth or it is not. If it's not here on Earth, then God has already taken it, and He took it shortly after the Babylonians tore down the temple. If it's still here on Earth, I do believe, like you say, that it eventually will be taken up to heaven. Now, the question of when that's going to happen, I don't know. Could it have already happened? Could it have been that after the Babylonians, it sat in the ground for a while, and then God waited and came back and got it? Who knows? But if it's still on Earth, I think it definitely is buried somewhere. Nobody probably knows where it's buried. It could be buried under, 15 feet of dirt, and it's just so far down that nobody ever thought to look. Oh, look underneath here. So that's the two theories. I'm agreeing with you on the whole. God took it. I think if He took it, it was shortly after Babylon. I think if He didn't take it, and it's still here on Earth, I think we will never find it. I think, if anything, I think God could have hidden it. Made sure that it was kind of hidden for a while before He kind of takes it up. And maybe when we get raptured, that's when He kind of says, "All right, I'm going down there to get them. I'm also going to sneak over there and grab that ark right quick on my way up."
Yeah.
So I don't think we'll ever have an answer, though. I think the Bible does point to where it could be, but the question is that it doesn't say when it's going to happen or if it had happened. So who knows? I think the ark is going to be up there with Roanoke, up there with the Mary Celeste, up there with the Cyclops, up there with flight night, or not flight. What was it? The airplanes that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle we talked about. I think it's just going to be one of those mysteries that we're never going to solve.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, because I mean, if it hasn't been found now, I don't think it will be found. So
yeah.
If it has been found, I kind of want to go check out that Ethiopian Orthodox. I mean, they're not going to let me see it, but
no,
I would like to just go visit that church one day. Just
yeah.
just,
Which that's what kind of like makes me question a little bit. Like, if you're so worried, like obviously we hear people touch it and they die. It's like, well, couldn't you just put it behind some glass? I get you're worried about kids running up and trying to touch the darn thing, and then you got dead kids everywhere. But like, can't you put it like 15 feet away and like you can look at it?
Yeah.
Like, why hide it? Like, if I had the Ark of the Covenant, I would be like, look at how powerful and is that a word? How awesome our God is. Here's the Ark of the Covenant, and inside are the tablets. I can't open it because if I do, I die. But there it is. That's it. Why hide it?
Right. All right. Well. Any announcements before we wrap up this episode?
Not that I can think of.
Alrighty. Well, hey, S'mores, thanks for tuning in. This is personally one of my favorite episodes. Many of you guys know I'm a Bible nerd, and so I really got to geek out on the Bible in this episode. So
we're trying to get him to actually do a Bible podcast underneath Beyond the Media. He hasn't taken us up on the offer. He said, I'm going to do news. And I'm like, you're the biggest theology nerd I know. You could rock it at a Bible podcast.
Hey, Beyond the Bible coming at some point. Don't know if soon, but at some point it will be coming.
And if you want to do a podcast, you want to do a podcast underneath us, maybe you want to do Beyond the Bible. If you have a podcast idea, random plug here, but email us at, I think it's Beyond the Media LLC at outlook.com. Email us. Get a podcast. We'll help you get started and make your money. We're not making money.
Not yet.
Not yet. That's the thing. You put up your flyers?
Nope.
We're that desperate. We're putting out flyers, guys.
You know what? I think I'm going to make that my project for tomorrow.
There you go. Go out. Put some posters up. All right. Thank y'all for watching. We appreciate y'all listening and tuning in. Once again, this is Beyond the Campfire, a product of Beyond the Media LLC. Y'all have a good weekend, s'mores. And hey, Thanksgiving break for some people. Don't be too crazy. See y'all.